The dojo was unusually quiet for a late afternoon. Bare feet rested neatly along the edge of the tatami mats, students sitting cross-legged in crisp white gis, backs straight, eyes forward. The wooden walls were lined with flags from different countries, but the American flag hung centered and higher than the rest, unmoving. A round clock ticked loudly above it, each second echoing through the room like a heartbeat. The class had just ended. Sweat still clung to the air. At the far end of the dojo, an elderly janitor shuffled slowly across the mat's edge, pushing a worn mop bucket. His shoulders were stooped from years of labor, his gray uniform faded and patched. He moved carefully, as if trying to make himself invisible, keeping his eyes down while cleaning the moisture left behind from training. That's when the voice cut through the silence. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" The janitor froze. The black belt instructor, thick-necked, broad-shouldered and red-faced, stepped forward. His gi was spotless, his belt worn and frayed from years of being tied too tight around his waist. He pointed sharply at the old man, his finger trembling with irritation. "I told you not to step on the mats until we're done," he barked. "Do you understand English, old man?" The janitor swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, sir. They told me to clean before the evening class." "Excuses," the instructor snapped. "You people are all the same, always in the way." A few students shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke, no one moved. The janitor's hands shook as he tightened his grip on the mop. His eyes flicked around the room, searching for any sign of support, but found only silence and lowered gazes. He nodded meekly. "I'll leave," he said softly. As he turned, the instructor shoved the mop handle aside with his foot, sending it clattering across the floor. "You'll leave when I say you leave," he growled. "You think this is a playground? This is a dojo. You show respect here." That's when she spoke. "You've made your point." The voice was calm, female, steady. Every head turned. She stood near the edge of the mat, not in a gi like the others, but in a simple green training top and camouflage pants. Athletic, composed, blonde hair pulled into a tight, no-nonsense bun. Her posture was relaxed, but there was something about the way she stood, balanced, grounded, that drew attention without effort. The instructor stared at her, incredulous. "Excuse me, you heard me," she said, meeting his eyes without blinking. He apologized. "There's no need to humiliate him." A murmur rippled through the students. The instructor scoffed and stepped closer, clearly amused. "And who are you to tell me how to run my dojo?" She glanced briefly at the janitor, then back at the instructor. "Someone who knows the difference between discipline and abuse." The room went cold. The instructor's face darkened. His jaw clenched. "This is none of your business." "It became my business when you put your hands on him," she replied. The janitor looked up in shock, eyes wide. No one had ever defended him here before. His lips parted, but no words came out. The instructor laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "You think wearing workout clothes makes you brave?" He pointed at her chest, his voice rising. "This is a black belt dojo. I've broken men twice your size." She didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice. "Then you should know better," she said quietly. That calmness only made him angrier. "Get off the mat," he snapped, "or I'll remove you myself." The students held their breath. The woman took one slow step forward, not aggressive, not submissive, just deliberate. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "I'm here to train, and he's here to work, that's it." The instructor stared at her for a long moment, then smiled, a thin, dangerous smile. "You've got nerve," he said. "I like that, but nerve gets people hurt." He turned to the students. "Class dismissed. Stay and watch if you want." Then he looked back at her. "You just challenged a black belt," he said. "Hope you're ready." She finally exhaled. "I didn't challenge you," she replied. "You challenged yourself." The janitor stood frozen between them, caught in a storm he never asked for. The flags on the wall hung still, the clock continued ticking, and somewhere deep in the room, an unspoken truth lingered. The instructor thought he was facing a disrespectful outsider. He had no idea he was standing across from a Navy SEAL. And this was only the beginning. The tension didn't break when the class was dismissed. If anything, it thickened. Students rose slowly from the mats, unsure whether to leave or stay. Some hesitated at the doorway, curiosity battling common sense. Others remained seated along the walls, backs straight, eyes locked on the center of the dojo. No one spoke. The silence felt heavy, expectant, like the moment before a storm breaks. The black belt instructor rolled his shoulders and loosened his neck, deliberately taking his time. He untied the top of his gi and let it fall open, exposing a thick, muscular chest marked by old scars. He smirked as if performing for an audience. "Let's make this simple," he said, cracking his knuckles. "You apologize to me and walk out, or we see how tough you really are." The woman didn't respond right away. She stood still, breathing slow and controlled, eyes scanning the room, not nervously, but methodically. She noted the distance between the walls, the spacing of the mats, the number of people present. Her gaze lingered briefly on the exits, habit, muscle memory, the kind that never goes away. The janitor hovered near the edge of the mat, wringing his hands. "Miss, it's okay," he whispered. "I don't want trouble." She turned to him gently. "You're not the problem," she said. "You never were." That kindness seemed to insult the instructor more than any challenge. "Oh, this is rich," he sneered. "You think you're some kind of hero now?" She faced him again. "No, I think you're out of line." He stepped closer, invading her space, towering over her. "You're standing in my dojo, under my rules." She looked up at him, unbothered. "Then you should be setting a better example." A few students exchanged uneasy glances. The instructor laughed again, louder this time. "All right, gloves off." He turned to one of the students, clear the center. Reluctantly, the students scooted back, forming a loose circle. The mats in the middle were bare now, a silent stage. The American flag loomed behind them, the clock ticking steadily above it. The woman took off her jacket and placed it neatly at the edge of the mat. She rolled her shoulders once, then once more, loosening muscles that had endured far worse than a dojo scuffle. Her stance shifted subtly, feet planted, weight balanced, knees relaxed, not a fighter's pose. A professional's, the instructor noticed. His smirk faltered for just a fraction of a second. "You got training?" He asked. "Enough." She replied. He scoffed. "You look like a gym rat who watches too many action movies." She didn't correct him. "Rules," he continued, "tap out or hit the mat." She nodded. "That works." The janitor backed away further, heart pounding. He'd seen men hurt here before, students pushed too far, humiliated for mistakes. This felt different. This felt personal. The instructor circled her slowly, eyes sharp, predatory. "You know," he said, "I've taught Marines, Army guys too. They all fold the same." Her eyes met his. "Then this will be familiar," she said. The students leaned forward. Without warning, the instructor lunged, fast and aggressive, a flurry of strikes aimed at overwhelming her, a classic bully tactic. Power over precision, but she didn't retreat. She stepped inside his reach, deflecting his arm with minimal movement, her body turning just enough to redirect the force. Her touch was light, almost casual. The instructor stumbled a half-step, surprised. The room inhaled. He recovered quickly, anger flashing across his face. "Lucky," he growled, charging again. This time she moved faster, not flashy, not brutal. Efficient. She slipped past his strike, her elbow brushing his ribs. Not hard enough to injure, but enough to warn. She stepped back immediately, creating space, resetting. The students stared. That wasn't dojo fighting. That was something else. The instructor paused, breathing heavier now. His confidence cracked just slightly. He hadn't expected resistance, certainly not composure. "Who are you?" he demanded. She didn't answer. Instead, she adjusted her stance again, eyes calm, voice steady. "You wanted a challenge," she said. "Here it is." The janitor watched with tears in his eyes, not from fear, but from something unfamiliar. "Respect." The instructor snarled and rushed forward again, rage replacing technique. He swung wide, overcommitting. This time, she didn't step back. She stepped in, and the dojo was about to learn a very hard lesson. The instructor charged with everything he had left. It wasn't controlled anymore. It wasn't technical. It was raw anger, years of ego, dominance, and unchecked authority pouring into one reckless attack. His feet slapped hard against the mat as he lunged forward, arms swinging in a wide arc meant to overwhelm and intimidate. The woman didn't flinch. She watched him the way a storm watcher studies a wave, calm, focused, already knowing where it would break. As his fist came in, she stepped diagonally, just off his centerline. Her left hand caught his wrist, not gripping, just guiding. At the same time, her right forearm slid under his elbow, lifting slightly. It was a movement so smooth, it almost looked gentle. Almost. His balance vanished in an instant. Before he could react, she pivoted her hips and stepped behind his lead leg. Her foot hooked his ankle while her hands continued the motion they had started, pulling his upper body forward as his base disappeared beneath him. For a split second, gravity forgot what it was supposed to do. The instructor's eyes widened, then the mat rushed up to meet him. He hit hard, air exploding from his lungs in a sharp, involuntary grunt. The sound echoed across the dojo like a dropped weight. His body skidded a few inches before stopping, face down, stunned. Silence fell, no gasps, no whispers, just the ticking of the clock. The students froze, unsure if they had just witnessed a sparring exchange or something far more serious. A few of them instinctively rose to their feet, hearts pounding. The woman didn't celebrate, didn't raise her hands, didn't say a word. She was already moving. She dropped to one knee beside him, her weight pinning his shoulder as her hand slid up his arm, rotating his wrist with surgical precision. Pain bloomed instantly, sharp and undeniable. The instructor groaned, his bravado evaporating. "Wait." She tightened the hold just enough to silence him. "Breathe," she said calmly, almost kindly, "or you'll make it worse." His face pressed into the mat. Sweat dripped from his forehead, mixing with humiliation. He tried to twist free, but every movement only increased the pressure. That's enough," he hissed. "Is it?" she asked. Her tone wasn't mocking. It was instructional. She adjusted her grip slightly, shifting the angle of his elbow. His body responded immediately, muscles locking as pain flared again. "Yes," he shouted. "Enough." She held him there for a moment longer, not out of cruelty, but to make sure the lesson landed. Then she eased the pressure, never fully releasing control. "Tap," she said. He slapped the mat with his free hand hard, once, twice. The sound was loud in the silent room. Only then did she let go. She rose smoothly to her feet and stepped back, giving him space. The instructor stayed down for a moment, breathing heavily, face burning. Slowly, he pushed himself up onto his knees, avoiding her eyes. The students stared at him, at the man who had ruled the dojo with fear and intimidation, now reduced to a humbled, shaking figure on the mat. The woman stood quietly, hands at her sides, heart rate barely elevated. This wasn't a victory to her, it was a correction. One of the students finally broke the silence. "Sensei." The instructor swallowed, his voice cracked as he spoke. "Everyone, take 5. No one moved. They were still watching her. She turned toward the janitor. He stood near the wall, mouth slightly open, mop forgotten at his feet. His eyes were wet, his hands trembling, not with fear this time, but disbelief. She walked over and picked up the fallen mop, handing it back to him. "You can finish your work," she said softly. "No one will bother you." He nodded, struggling to find words. "Thank you," he whispered. I've never seen anything like that." She offered a small smile. "You shouldn't have to." Behind them, the instructor finally looked up at her. What style was that?" he asked hoarsely. She paused. For a moment, the room seemed to lean in. "It doesn't have a name you'd recognize," she said. "It's meant to end fights quickly." He frowned. "Military." She met his gaze for the first time since the takedown. "Yes." A murmur rippled through the students. The instructor's confidence crumbled further. He glanced at the American flag hanging above them, then back at her. "You're not just some athlete, are you?" he said quietly. She didn't answer, but the way she stood, the discipline, the restraint, the control, told them everything. The dojo had fallen completely silent again, and now everyone wanted to know exactly who she was. The silence didn't fade. It pressed down on the dojo like weight, heavy and undeniable. Even the students who had trained there for years, who had grown used to shouting commands and the sharp crack of strikes, stood frozen, unsure of how to exist in the space that had suddenly changed. The instructor was still on his knees. His breathing had slowed, but his pride hadn't recovered. He wiped sweat from his brow and avoided looking at the students, at the janitor, at the woman who now stood several steps away, composed and distant, as if the fight had already slipped into memory. "You embarrassed me," he muttered. She turned back to him, not sharply, not aggressively, just enough to acknowledge the words. "No," she said, "you embarrassed yourself." That stung more than the throw. He clenched his jaw. "You come into my dojo, challenge my authority, and expect me to thank you." "I came into your dojo to train," she replied. "You challenged your own authority the moment you decided fear was the same thing as respect." The students felt it then, something breaking, something long overdue. A few shifted their stance. One lowered his eyes in shame. Another straightened his back, as if realizing for the first time what discipline was supposed to look like. The instructor pushed himself fully to his feet. He stood slower now, more cautious, his movements stripped of bravado. He kept a careful distance between them. "You could have seriously hurt me," he said. "I didn't," she answered, and that was a choice. That answer unsettled him. He studied her again, really studied her this time, not as a target, not as a challenge, but as a presence, the way she stood, evenly balanced, the way her eyes never wandered, the way she controlled the room without raising her voice. "You didn't fight like a civilian," he said quietly. She didn't deny it. The janitor cleared his throat softly, unsure if he was even allowed to speak. "Sir, I should go," he said, gesturing to the door. The woman shook her head. "You can finish. Class isn't over." The instructor flinched at that, at the idea that someone else had just defined the moment for him. But he didn't object. "Everyone sit," she said, not as an order, but an expectation. To everyone's surprise, they did. White jis folded neatly as the students returned to the mat, backs straight, eyes forward. The atmosphere felt different now, less like a school, more like a briefing room. The woman took a slow breath. "I don't enjoy stepping in," she said, "but I won't stand by when someone abuses power, especially over someone who can't fight back." Her eyes flicked briefly to the janitor. "In my line of work," she continued, "the smallest lapse in judgment gets people hurt or killed." The instructor swallowed. "What line of work is that?" She reached down and tugged the hem of her training top slightly, just enough for the edge of a tattoo to become visible along her ribcage. A trident, simple, black, precise. A few of the older students sucked in their breath. The instructor stared, recognition crashing into him all at once. His face drained of color. "That's," he whispered. Yes, she said. No rank, no name, no introduction. She didn't need to say it. The room understood. One student began, then stopped himself, unsure if it was even appropriate to finish the sentence. She raised a hand gently. I'm not here in that capacity. I'm here as a student and as a human being. The instructor's shoulders sagged. Years of authority collapsed inward, replaced by something raw and exposed. I didn't know, he said. If I had, that wouldn't have changed what you did, she replied, and that's the point. The words landed hard. She turned to face him fully now. Strength isn't proven by who you can intimidate. It's proven by who you protect. The janitor stood a little straighter. The instructor nodded slowly, shame written across his face. You're right. The admission cost him something. Everyone could see it. I built this place to teach discipline, he said. Somewhere along the way, I forgot what that meant. She studied him, weighing his words. Then remember it, she said, starting now. He bowed, not the sharp, performative bow he gave students, but a deep one, genuine, earned. I apologize, he said, voice steady but low, to him, to you, to this class. The dojo remained silent. Then the woman did something unexpected. She returned the bow, not as a subordinate, as an equal. The students felt it like a shift in gravity. This wasn't about humiliation anymore. It was about accountability. She turned back toward the janitor. Finish up, she said again, smiling faintly. We'll wait. He nodded, eyes glistening, and picked up his mop with a dignity he hadn't been allowed before. As the clock continued its steady ticking, the dojo felt transformed. The fight was over, but the lesson had just begun. The mop moved slowly across the mat, not because the janitor was tired, but because, for the first time in a long while, he wasn't trying to rush out of sight. No one barked orders at him. No one watched with irritation. The sound of bristles against the mat filled the dojo, steady and ordinary, grounding the moment in something real. The students sat quietly, backs straight, eyes forward. They didn't whisper. They didn't fidget. Whatever they had come to learn that day, they knew they were witnessing something far more important. The instructor stood near the wall, hands folded behind his back. He looked smaller somehow, not weaker, but stripped of the false armor he had worn for years. Each pass of the mop seemed to scrape something old and rotten off the floor along with the sweat. When the janitor finished, he wrung out the mop and hesitated. Sir, he said softly, unsure who he was even addressing now. The woman turned toward him first. You're done, she said. Thank you. 2 words, simple, honest. He nodded, emotion tightening his throat. As he pushed the bucket toward the exit, the instructor stepped forward. Wait, the instructor said. The room stiffened. The janitor froze, fear flickering back into his eyes out of habit. The instructor took a breath. Then, in front of everyone, he bowed his head. I owe you an apology, he said. You didn't deserve the way I treated you. No one does. The janitor stared at him, stunned. His hands trembled again, but this time he didn't look down. It's all right, he said after a moment. No, the instructor replied. It's not, but I'll do better. The janitor nodded once, then left the dojo quietly, shoulders straighter than when he had entered. When the door closed behind him, the instructor turned to face the class. Line up, he said. The students moved instantly, forming neat rows, but the energy was different now. Cleaner, sharper, not fear, driven. Intentional, the instructor bowed to them. I failed today, he said. I forgot why I started teaching. Discipline without respect is just control, and control breaks people. His gaze flicked briefly toward the woman, standing calmly at the side of the mat. I won't let that happen here again. The students bowed backs, lowly, deliberately. The woman watched in silence. This wasn't her space to command. Her work was already done. One student finally gathered the courage to speak. Ma'am, "Thank you." She shook her head gently. "You don't owe me anything." "Yes, we do." Another said, "You showed us what real strength looks like." She considered that, then nodded once. "Then remember it. Strength is restraint. It's accountability, and it's knowing when not to strike." She reached for her jacket. The instructor stepped forward. "You're welcome to stay," he said. "Train here, teach even. We could learn a lot from you." A faint smile touched her lips. "I don't stay long in one place." He nodded, understanding more than she'd said. As she headed toward the exit, the entire class bowed, not because they were told to, but because it felt right. She paused at the door and looked back. "Take care of each other," she said. "That's the real lesson." Then she was gone. Outside, the late afternoon sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the parking lot. She inhaled deeply, the tension finally leaving her shoulders. No medals, no applause, just quiet. The janitor stood near his cart, waiting. "I wanted to thank you again," he said. "Most people walk past." She met his eyes. "Not all battles look the same," she said, "but standing up still counts." He smiled, a genuine one. "You changed that place today." She shook her head. They changed themselves. She walked away then, blending back into the world, just another woman passing by, carrying no visible sign of the battles she'd fought or the discipline she lived by. Inside the dojo, the instructor watched the door for a long moment before turning back to his students. "Class," he said, voice steady, "begin." And this time it truly did. True heroes don't fight for glory. They fight for dignity, duty, and the courage to do what's right even when no one is watching. Weeks passed, but the dojo was no longer the same. It wasn't something you could point to immediately. The mats were the same. The flags still hung in the same places. The clock still ticked with the same steady rhythm. Yet anyone who stepped inside could feel it, an invisible shift in the air, as if the walls themselves remembered what had happened. Training began on time now, not because students were afraid to be late, but because they wanted to be present. The instructor no longer shouted to fill silence. His voice was measured, deliberate. Corrections were firm but respectful. When a student struggled, he demonstrated patience instead of punishment. When someone failed, they were taught, not ridiculed. And every now and then, his eyes drifted to the edge of the mat where a jacket had once been folded neatly beside a calm, unassuming woman who changed everything without staying long enough to claim credit. The janitor returned every afternoon, at first cautiously, half expecting old habits to snap back into place, but they never did. Students nodded at him now. Some offered to carry the bucket. One even held the door open for him. Small things, but small things mattered. One evening, a new student joined the class, a nervous teenager with shaking hands and borrowed gear. When he stumbled during drills, the room tensed, bracing for the sharp rebuke that once would have followed. It never came. The instructor knelt beside him instead. "Everyone starts somewhere," he said. "Get back up." The boy did, and the class continued. Across town, the woman moved on with her life the way she always had, quietly, without attachment. She trained where she could, stayed where she needed to, left when it was time. Her past remained unspoken, her service unseen by most. That was how she preferred it. But some lessons had a way of traveling without her. One afternoon, as she passed a small coffee shop, a familiar face stepped out, the janitor. He smiled when he saw her, the same genuine warmth in his eyes. "I thought that was you." She nodded. "How are you?" "Better," he said. "A lot better." They stood for a moment, sharing the comfortable silence of people who didn't need to explain themselves. "I wanted you to know," he added, "that place, it's different now. They treat everyone different." She smiled softly. "Good," he hesitated. "You never told them who you really were." She shrugged. "They didn't need to know. But I do," he said, tapping his chest lightly. "I'll remember." She gave a small nod. One warrior acknowledging another kind of strength. As she walked away, the sun dipped low behind the buildings, casting long shadows across the street. She blended into the crowd again, unnoticed, uncelebrated, and that was exactly how it should be. Back at the dojo, a plaque appeared quietly near the entrance. No names, no dates, just a single line engraved into polished wood. Discipline without respect is not strength. No one ever asked where it came from, they just lived by it. The instructor would sometimes pause before class, looking at the students as they stretched and prepared, not as followers, but as individuals entrusted to him. He knew now that authority wasn't something you took. It was something you earned every single day, and somewhere deep inside he carried the memory of the moment he lost and gained, something far more important than a fight. The students carried it too. They trained harder, smarter, kinder, because they had seen the difference between power and purpose. And far beyond that dojo, beyond that town, beyond recognition or reward, a Navy SEAL continued her path, guided by the same code that had always defined her: protect the weak, correct injustice, leave the world better than you found it, not for glory, not for applause, but because it was the right thing to do. Elite Forces Untold true strength isn't proven by how hard you strike, but by who you choose to stand up for when no one expects you to.